Good morning. Whoops, I lost my candy. My goodness. I hope you have your candy out there. You're going to need it later. I'd like to welcome all of you, all your smiling faces in this beautiful morning, and those on Zoom. As a former teacher, one of my favorite things to do was to read to my class for about 30 minutes after the kids came in from lunch recess, kind of settle them down before we started our lessons. Now, these were fourth graders, so the books were not picture books, but chapter books. And every day before I began, I would review what we had been reading about the day before, much like the TV shows today say, previously on. So this being the fifth and last Sunday of our Fruit of the Spirit series, I would like to do a quick review of the previous weeks. Our series is based on Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. Paul was writing to the people of Galatia when he said these words, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." Tonda began the series with love. Love is the center of everything. Without love, it would be very difficult to develop the other fruit. Week 2, Kathy talked about joy and faithfulness. For joy, she used the examples that Jesus used of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. God rejoices at lost souls being found. She reminded us to be positive and intentional to help others. For faithfulness, we were reminded to demonstrate our faith. In other words, act. Week 3, Amy talked about patience and self-control. Of course, we all love the doc stories. For patience, we need to see others through God's eyes and practice being able to accept trouble, delay, not getting what we want without getting angry. For self-control, we were reminded to think about what we're saying and when we say it, and to control our words and tone when speaking to others. Last week, Tom spoke about peace and gentleness. Peace is a state of mind, and when we feel peace, we need to share it with others. When we are not feeling peace, we need to take a step back, breathe, and remember to trust in God no matter what. For gentleness, we were reminded to listen to each other and be gentle in our actions and reactions. I heard a story about a woman who was standing at a bus stop. She had just cashed her tax refund check and was carrying more money than usual. She looked around and noticed a shabbily dressed man standing nearby. As she watched, she saw a man walk up to him, hand him some money, and whisper something in his ear. She was so touched by that act of kindness that she decided to do the same. So she reached into her purse and took out $10, handed it to the man, and whispered to him, "Never despair, never despair." The next day, when she came back to the bus stop, there was the same man again. But this time, he walked up to her and handed her $110. She was dumbfounded and asked, "Well, what's this for?" He said, "Your horse won, lady. Never despair paid 10 to 1. When I was growing up in southern Ohio, I rode the school bus every day for 12 years. We didn't have kindergarten back then, that's how old I am. So from first grade through my senior year, I rode the bus. Connie Hackworth's dad was my bus driver for most of those years. I loved riding the bus, and I think her dad was probably one of the reasons. He always had a smile and a kind word every day as I boarded the bus. But every single day for those 12 years, every single day, as I was walking out of the house, my mom always said to me, "Be nice, be kind, be sweet." Every single day. I don't know if I lived up to it. I hope so, but anyway. So today we're going to look at the last two fruit of the Spirit, kindness and goodness. These two words are related. As I studied for today's message, I realized the word good is used in the definition of kindness, and kind is used in the definition of goodness. The word kindness is defined as goodness, uprightness, gentleness. It is a useful kindness. It refers to meeting real needs in God's way, in His timing and manner. Divine kindness is the Spirit-produced goodness which meets the needs of another person, doing so without being harsh or cruel. Goodness is an intrinsic quality, focusing on the inner person. The goodness that comes from God shows itself as a spiritual virtue. So that's where Paul is going with kindness and goodness. It's a combination of an inner virtue, goodness, and an action-oriented virtue, kindness. Random acts of kindness, things we do. One of the best examples Jesus used to teach about kindness and goodness comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put Jesus to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Now let's just stop here for a moment and realize something. This guy didn't really want to hear what Jesus had to say. He was more interested in making himself look good as he was testing Jesus. The guy knew his Bible. He knew the right answers. He's one of those people who knows the word but can't apply it. He wanted to talk theology, but he didn't want to do theology. He proved he didn't know who his neighbor was just by asking the question. Do you know who your neighbor is? So Jesus told him a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Now, we'll stop again. Can you imagine that? Here's a priest, one of the holiest men in the land. He sees this guy and walks to the other side of the road. The priest needs to confront this man's neediness. The man is lying there bloody and naked, but the priest decides not to help. It is one of those decisions where kindness and goodness were definitely not seen. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Levites had a special place in the temple. They were servants and helped serve during worship, and they were interpreters of the law. He should have been eager to help this man. He had the opportunity, the wisdom, but as the Levite got a good look at this guy, he also chose to cross to the other side of the road and leave the half-dead man lying there. Now, some commentators have said that the priest didn't stop because he thought the Levite would stop. And the Levite saw that the priest didn't stop, so he thought he shouldn't stop either. And yet, the poor guy was still lying there. These two men lack the kindness and goodness we're looking at. There was no compassion, no willingness to help this man. So now Jesus comes to the main point. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." The guy who helps him is not his neighbor. He's not from Jerusalem. He's from the wrong side of the tracks. He's a Samaritan. That's key in the story. Jesus tells us the guy from Samaria helps the guy from Jerusalem. You see, they were enemies. The Jews from Jerusalem and the Samaritan Jews from up north hated each other. The Samaritan Jews didn't dress like the southern Jews. They didn't worship the same way. They claimed Bethel was their center of worship and not Jerusalem. They were considered second-class Jews. Yet this second-class Jew helps the first-class Jew, while the real neighbors pass by. Do you see where Jesus is going with this? Out of all the people who could have been neighbors to this man, the one who became his neighbor was the despised foreigner. You could just imagine the lawyer turning redder and redder, not in embarrassment, but in anger. So then Jesus asked the lawyer, "Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" And he said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Did you notice the lawyer, when he answered, couldn't even say the good and kind neighbor was the Samaritan? He pretty much just said, "Yeah, the guy who showed him mercy." And of course, today, when someone is really, really helpful, what do we call them? A good Samaritan. That phrase has become synonymous with kindness, goodness, and compassion. You probably thought you were going to get through one of my messages without hearing about my walks in nature. Sorry to disappoint. There are several places that I like to walk, but the pictures that I have chosen to use all come from the same park, sort of like comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. Okay, Tonda number 1. In the spring, when the buds are just coming out on the trees and there is a hint of warmth in the air, I find myself thanking God for this absolutely perfect day. Number 2. Then 3 months later, when summer rolls around, the trees are all leafed out, the air is hot, but the shade is cool. I find myself thanking God for this absolutely perfect day. Then 3 months later, fall shows up in all her glory. The leaves are beautiful. The air is just cool enough for wearing a fleece, and I love the smell of fall. Then I find myself thanking God for this absolutely beautiful day. I bet you can't guess where I'm going next. Then 3 months later, winter arrives. The leaves are all gone from the trees. Sometimes the snow covers the ground, and everything is silent except for the crunching of my boots on the path. And even though I'm wearing multiple layers, hat, scarf, glove, boots, my nose is always cold. And yet, I find myself thanking God for this absolutely perfect day. Okay, so you're probably sitting there thinking a couple of things. What in the world does any of this have to do with the fruit of the Spirit? And how can she possibly think that 4 completely different conditions are all perfect? My answer? Attitude. So much of our outlook on life is based on our attitude. If we get up in the morning thinking this is going to be a terrible day, it certainly won't help the outcome. But if we get up with thankfulness in our hearts and a positive attitude, we may still have our troubles, but they will be easier to navigate. Love, joy, faithfulness, patience, self-control, gentleness, peace, goodness, and kindness can all be more fully developed and intentionally applied to our lives and the lives of those around us if we have a positive attitude and look to God for guidance. I hope you have enjoyed our series on the fruit of the Spirit. It was meant to be a reminder, a jump starter, or an inspiration for us to be more intentional on using these qualities to mold our lives, to be a little more like Jesus and a little less like us. In closing, I would like to leave you with a visual. I have heard many excellent messages over the years, but there are very few that I can specifically recall. I know some of it's from my old age memory, but one I remember is Mary Lee Martin saying, "Notice what you notice." How many of you remember that? Yep. I don't remember what the theme was, but I'm sure she was telling us to notice the people around you that might need a helping hand, a word of encouragement, or just someone to talk to. Notice what you notice. Another example I remember was Bonnie Glandon talking about the killdeer that had built a nest on the ground in her yard. We had killdeer this year build a nest right in the middle of our driveway. I had to put a little red flag beside it so Jim wouldn't run over it when he came in the drive. And the killdeer is so different from other birds, and yet the mother bird had been so good about sitting on the eggs until they hatched and taking care of the little birds afterwards. She used this example to compare to a friend of hers whose daughter had chosen a different lifestyle than she would have liked. And yet the girl was still her daughter, and she still loved her. Just like God loves all of us, even if we think that someone is not living up to our expectations. So here comes my visual. I hope you all have your candy. If you don't, borrow somebody's or use your imagination, you can get some on the way out. I would like for you to imagine yourself as a piece of candy. You are wrapped in kindness and filled with goodness. Wrapped in kindness and filled with goodness. With that in mind, go into the world and make a difference because God has made a difference in your life. Be kind, be good.